Dear participants, we are about to begin our next session, this faculty development program. The resource person for this session is our very beloved Director of College Development Council, Dibrugarh University, and Chairperson of Center for Juridical Studies of Dibrugarh University, Dr. Rupam Soikia sir. And he is going to enlighten us by speaking on the topic situational leadership and its various dimensions. Dr. Rupam Soikia sir did his graduation from the prestigious Cotton College and thereafter masters from Pune University with a distinction. He holds a PhD degree from Dibrugarh University. He also pursued lately LLB from Dr. RKB Law College under Dibrugarh University. So he is also an alumni of this college. He started his career as a lecturer in Tinsukia College and later joined Dibrugarh University, where he holds various academic and administrative posts, that is, from the post of the Deputy Registrar to the post of the Chairperson of Center for Juridical Studies. He has 21 research publications in various national and international journals. He has also contributed chapters in various edited books. He has acted as members of various selection committee of the central government institution. He has been invited as keynote speaker and resource person in various workshops and faculty development programs organized by the Academic Staff College of Guwahati University. His area of interest are basically contemporary history, environmental jurisprudence, international affairs, etc. In total, he has an experience of more than 20 years in academic and administration. So now I request Dr. Rupam Soikia sir to take over the session. Sir, it's all yours.
Thank you. A very warm good morning to all the participants of this FDP program. Just before start of this presentation, I've been informed that Professor Ramesh Bharpatra Guhai has conducted a session. I think a person of the stature of Professor Bharpatra Guhai, probably he has enlightened you with so many aspects and dimensions as regards to the pedagogy and its emerging trends, contextualizing the relevance of the subject in the today's concept. Friends, probably you might be recollecting the opportunity to address this why I was assigned the responsibility to deliver the keynote address. On that very delivery, I took the opportunity also to give ABC an idea, very preliminary idea, orientation to the situational leadership in teaching and learning. Now, since time is very precious, and we have to, because it is also a great challenge to economize the art of delivery in the non-offline mode. So I prefer to use the word non-offline mode. So it is what we prefer to call on teaching and so very briefly, I would like to give a very quick observation on the context of what situational leadership. Situational leadership is an integral part of the professional leaders based on certain standards and expectations, which may be contextual also. Uncertainty management and situational leadership may appear to be identical on certain aspects, but actually not so. The latter is purpose and meaningful. This is my observation, what I could have understood the concept of the situational leadership. Because when we will be dealing with the students in a classroom, or we will be using this online mode of education, then we have to probably face one kind of challenge, that we have to economize the entire package of education. So they are. So this is the trust is that the situational leadership. So next is that substantive point to be discussed. So since we have to travel a lot, identify time right from the design of the design and dealing with the content, then we have to be very cautious, as well as we have to learn the art of economizing our delivery model. So substantive point to be discussed, whether pedagogy is a part of situational leadership or not, whether normative approach is only remedy for dealing with the concept or not, what might be the proposition of the situational leadership. So basically, you see, a teacher is to deal with some uncertain situations in a classroom. There, in the offline mode, he or she gets the opportunity to read the face of the students. That possibility is not available in online mode. So it is a great challenge, because we are accustomed to the field of offline mode of delivery, but here we have to articulate certain propositions because we cannot read the face of the students naturally. So the reading of the face of the students is a great impetus to a teacher to adjust or to adjust his mood of delivery, because until and unless we can go the scale of responsiveness from students, it becomes very difficult on our part to gauge or to understand whether the student could have followed us or not. So that's why here we have to construct certain assumptions, that based on those assumptions we have to be smarter in the sense. Now the concept of smart education, because online education has a dimension as regards to the smart education also. When I focus on the uncertainty management, because the offline mode of education, when we get the opportunity to read the face of the student, we have get the opportunity to the direct interactive dialogue with the students. That benefit we do not get that scope in the online mode. Here we have to customize our delivery model to satisfy the needs of the students. So in terms of the uncertainty management, may I beg your permission to cite a few illustrations. What can be the style of uncertainty management? Suppose here you see there was a referring to judgment of the Allahabad High Court, because here in this case the Mimamsa doctrine was applied. What is the case? The two candidates got the equal marks in a competitive examination, where the students who secured the higher marks in the oral should be selected, or the other candidate who secured the higher marks in the written examination should be placed in the list of the selected candidate for a single post. So this kind of situation here, we have to learn how to deal with the uncertainty. Here in this case, you'll find the equal marks in the because the students, both the students, they have got almost scored almost equal. Now in that sense, because we have to select one where we'll give the preference. So the judgment came like that the written examination should be given weightage rather than the oral component, because written examination, it gives the scope to test the concept as well as the depth of the knowledge, domain knowledge of the student. So the judgment, it came in a way that the students who have secured the higher marks in the written component should be given the preference. So this is a kind of indication, not it is an exhaustive dispensation as regards to the concept of the uncertainty management. Another example, the conflict resolution, reconciliation and resolution, because conflict resolution is a very important component of teaching and learning. So again here, I want to refer to one example. Two men traveling in their respective chariots. One of them lost his horses, and the chariot of the other got burned through fire. Due to outbreak of the fire in the inn where they stayed during night, how would they reach the destination? So the problems of this, because here we'll find the spirit of reconciliation, how the spirit of synthesis, how we can synthesize when the two conflicting zones come to our fore. We can apply our common sense, or we can apply our intelligence to the problem. The solution for this problem under this situation can be here, because the horse of the one person got lost and the other got damaged or destroyed in the fire. So one person has got the chariot, the other person has got the horse. So the owner of the horse has lent the horse to tie to the chariot so that they can travel together. So this is a kind of, you can define this context in this very simple form as a resolve a conflict. So then, before going to the topic, because I am referring to some examples to contextualize the concept of the uncertainty management by referring to two illustrations. So from that, the quality of a teacher to deal with the uncertainty in the classroom, because it has to be conceptualized, has to be dealt with. So the another very important component that I understand that it is relevant, especially in the online mode of education, that is that we have to frame a design or a grammar of online pedagogy. So what can be the grammar of the online pedagogy? That is a very, very important issue to be discussed here, or to be pertinent here, because personally I consider that teaching itself is research. It is unique and provides a platform to critically introspect the art of teaching, the limitations, and the domain knowledge. Learned friends, may I bring your attention to one very critical aspect, that a teacher, if he or she cannot identify his or her limitations, I think it will be very difficult on his or her part to master those deficiencies. So I think that SWOT analysis that we nowadays we usually talk about, the SWOT analysis, that is the strength, weakness, then the strength, then the weakness, then the opportunities and the challenges. It is applicable very much to our day-to-day professional life also, because we have to learn to understand our limitations. So who will help us to understand our limitations? Because I have to admit my limitations at this point of time, because I do not know whether this connectivity, I fail to give the PowerPoint presentation, because I have to be honest to admit that this is a kind of my limitations. Maybe this is not because of my personal fault or anything that's developed technically. So because of the lockdown and this curfew, I could not manage, because otherwise I could have managed a very technical expert to keep with me always as a spare parts, because, or a spare wheel, because it is required, because in this kind of situation especially required. So I could not manage that at this point of time, and yesterday I tested several times and it worked it very wonderfully. So I was confident enough that this system will work and it did not give any difficulty during the course of the deliberation. So the identification of the limitations is one of the most important criteria that we should recognize or we should consider, and it is limited, it is relevant for the teaching and as well as research. Further, teaching itself is a research. It is a part of the action research, because when we construct the concept or deal with a concept in the classroom, we have to first understand the limitation of the concept. The diagram that I show or the graphical presentation that I made to make the concept clear, in the sense that while dealing with a concept, we have to go step by step. So in the context of the environmental jurisprudence, or you can term the environmental history, because nowadays this is a very, very important coming domain, the environment. And what should be the, because what should be key areas for the environmental study. When we will deal with the limitations of the environmental laws to tackle the present day situation, then first of all, when we'll deal with the concept of the environmental jurisprudence, we have to know the Article 21 of the Constitution, which has a direct resultant effect on framing the laws relating to the environment. Article 21 has the direct link or the relevance. Then in terms of the environmental history, if we construct the outlines of the environmental history in terms of its relevance in today's context, then we have to connect it with the Article 21. Because environmental history, why it is relevant? Because when there was no statutory laws or even no legislations as such, the people were conscious, or the state did enough steps to protect the environment. Not to speak of the other things, because all of us probably we read in the history books about the philanthropic works of the Ashoka the Great. Because at that point of time, the consciousness towards environment, it was very much prevalent in the concept of the Ashokan state policy. Then even in Assam, you will say in the medieval period, that in the great Vaishnavite movement, when it was started by Shankar Deva, we find that his environmental consciousness is prevalent. It could be understood, it could be perceived to a considerable extent in the way that he suggested or he patronized the use of the natural things in our day-to-day life. So these are some of the very fine piece of examples when the internal consciousness of the human society, of the human beings itself played a leading role in creating the awareness, even though at that point of time there was no as such mechanism statutorily to deal with the environment. But here nowadays we have got a plethora of the laws and the regulations and the law enforcing agencies, but still then the environmental protection has not become possible. So this is the dichotomy between the two concepts. So as a teacher, because our limitations, if we fail to connect the history, the environmental history, and the post-modern society, the environment, the obligations, the compulsions created by the statutory bodies of the statute to implement the environmental law, then the protection of the Article 21 it has been extended to the field of the environmental jurisprudence. So the link, so this is a kind of what we'll call the transdisciplinary approach. Now, our entire education system has been modeled on the choice-based credits model. So the students, the learners, as well as the teachers have been given enough scope to widen the dimensions as well as the values of the teaching and learning. So friends, there is while we're dealing with the students, because naturally we can categorize from our experience the level of the students in terms of their responsiveness. It is very much natural, because a classroom is not a homogeneous entity. A classroom is not a homogeneous entity, because I can say that a teacher, to some extent, it must have values and the what we'll call the internal strength as well as the internal traits of a mother, because it is the art of the motherhood. A mother can deal with the 4 children or the 5 children which are inherent or with her own art of dealing, because a mother is not required to be taught how to deal with the children. So that is the beauty of the motherhood. So in that sense, I feel personally that a teacher is required to have that kind of spirit, the motherhood spirit, the mentality of a mother to deal with the situation. Because a classroom is not a homogeneous entity, we cannot expect it to, we cannot expect that it will be a homogeneous entity. If we construct our sessions, our style of delivery or our pedagogy based on that hypothesis, then I am afraid that a teacher will fail in dealing with the art of pedagogy. So normally we'll find the average students, then some students will find the slow learners, then we find the students who are good learners, and also we find some students who unfortunately belong to the differently able category. And even we find also students who are suffering from different kind of psychological complexities. So this is again will demand that we have to master the art of dealing with these kind of various components in the classroom. So naturally this is a challenge, because here I am, my focus is that we have to identify our weakness and how we'll transform the weakness into strength. And this transformation from the weakness to the strength will be possible only if we can compartmentalize the various segments in a classroom. Because we are not, because a great educationist, Margaret, he used to say that a teacher while dealing it in a classroom is to teach 20 students, not a group of 20 students. That is very, very important. That is the philosophy of the teaching is there. So I am giving some observational comment, because while designing the online pedagogy, we have to critically look into these aspects. Now, value of teaching, because every output, because teaching is outcome based, and without value, without the abstract component, a sustainability of a teaching cannot be expected. Learned friends, please let me share with my observations, or rather I would like to share with you 2-3 very critical things that often disturb me. So one thing is that when we'll talk about the style of pedagogy, suppose now we are talking about the online mode of education. So this is online mode of education. This is the framework. After 5 years or after 10 years, this mode can be further, it can be remodeled. I think you are getting my point. It can be remodeled, it can be redesigned, or it can be there can be some paradigm shift that we'll witness after 5 years, because it is supposed to happen. So its framework will remain changing, like the models of the car. Like the models of the car, its framework will remain changing. But what ultimately sustain the output, the value of the teaching. So the value of the teaching is what? a teacher who knows his limitations, a teacher who has the concept, who can frame the critical question on the concept, because every concept cannot be a full concept. It must have certain limitations. And you will find that in American mode of teaching and learning, because one of my very friend, he informed or he gave me some literature based on what I could have understood, because a teacher do not actively conclude in American mode of teaching. Why? Now this is a very substantial question. When I deal with a concept, I have to pass through certain stages. I have to elaborate the concept. I have to define the limitations of the concept. Now here the questions rises. I think I am entering to the most critical stage of my deliberation here at this point of time. So a teacher, the attitude of a teacher and the attitude of a learner, because a learner will try to follow the teacher, because and the teacher will follow the his knowledge base from what he could have or she could have learned from the experience, what he or she learned from her teachers, what he or she has learned from the society. And that's why probably here a pertinent question rises. Should a teacher, I repeat, should a teacher solely depend on logic or reason to address a question on a concept? Because from the concept, the research question is to be framed, because it is the result of the pedagogy that is to teach the students to frame the questions, to frame the research questions. Now, the importance of the American model of pedagogy is important in the sense that, because if a teacher, his or herself concludes, then the student level of creativity will stop there. It will stop there. He or she, to my understanding, should see the direction to conclude. I repeat, to see the direction to conclude. Then only they will find the interest. Because this can be a very great challenge in the online mode of education. Because here we cannot read the face of the students. Because some of the students will definitely come because this is under compulsion. That should stand. We should listen to the lectures of our teachers, because out of compulsion. The moment they will create the interest, they will find the interest, automatically their journey. So creation of the interest, I think the passive mode of conclusion by the teachers can give a kind of impetus to the students to be smarter, because when the teacher will be delivering online mode of education, the students shall have to be smarter. So our focus is not only to make the students learn. We at the same time we have to make them smarter enough to grasp the concept and to promote the out-of-box thinking. So this is the critical dimensions of concept and dealing with the concept, framing of the research questions. Because if the research question is not framed after dealing a concept, I think the beauty of the teaching and the interest of the students or the learner is infected to a commendable extent. Now, I remember at this stage that Samuel Shields, in his book, a very famous educationist, The Calling of Education, said the teacher does research and he also bases his teaching. I repeat, bases in teaching on the research done by others. If we solely base our teaching on the research work done by the others, what can be the consequences? So according to Seal, that where this will be that our resultant effect of such kind of teaching will be infected and it will be not durable. So this is my observations. So that's why a teacher's teaching is a part of research. So until and unless the research questions are there, the teaching cannot be complete. So now we can summarize the various stages of framing the research question, that dealing with the concept during the course of pedagogy. One is the identification of the concept. Identification of the concept is the first most important thing. Then we have to remove the ambiguity of the concept. Ambiguity of the concept we have to remove. Then we have to clarify whether those ambiguity is actually speculative or it is substantive, whether we can remove those ambiguity or not. Until and unless we remove those ambiguities, how we can expect that the student will find interest in the subject? We cannot allow the student to remain in hazy heights. We have to give them a direction so they can trade in they trade smoothly, or at least they can construct or they can also be a party towards the construction of the problem. Because many scholars, I think many researchers will admit one thing, because construction of the research question is much more challenging rather than finding solution to a research question. Then exception always remains there, because when we'll deal with the doctrines, deal with the postulates, or deal with any kind of problem, we'll find that there is always remains an exception. Because law always will find that even the judiciary also will find that when a former judgment is criticized in the subsequent judgment, what a judge do? Basically, the judge tries to create an exception from the ratio, or what was the reason or the logic of the previous judgment. So an exception is tried to be created. Similarly, a teacher, when he or she can understand the limitations of the concept and at the same time the exceptions, because the concept we design, because suppose like the online mode of education will be successful provided the internet connectivity is uninterrupted. It should not be of the kind that we have suffered today, for the inconveniences that we often experience. It needs to be ensured, because high speed connectivity internet is a must for the success of the online mode of education. Then there are different devices, there are different mechanisms. Those mechanisms are to be used, because I think across the days so many experts has deal with the concept. Now my focus is that until and unless an abstract value is created, ultimately, if at the fag end of this day, because what I have deliberated, because if I have deliberated something meaningful to you, you will accept me. Or if I have not catered to your aspirations, or I have not even delivered to your expectation, you will simply brush me aside. Simply, the same things happens in case of a teacher. I cannot make you, I cannot compel you that you accept what I have deliberated, because you will accept only if my deliberation is based on ratio, on logic, as well as on reasons, then again the most important part, that how I am applying logic with reasonableness to fulfill a particular objective. So this is the experience. Experience is the greatest capital. That's why Justice Holmes stated one, that it is not the logic, it is not simply the reason that is the tool of teaching. It should be remodeled by experiences, because experiences of learning, then experiences of teaching helps a teacher to be mature, to identify weakness, to identify the strength, and to master in the art of transforming the weakness to strength. So this is the, in sum total, the beauty of pedagogy. So situational leadership in that context, because in offline mode of teaching, we've because as I have already stated, that we follow certain grammar of teaching right from the preparation of the planning of a lesson till conduct of constructs of the problem, till the mode of solving the problem, right from the lesson planning till the conduct of the assignments, evaluation, etc., etc. So in the online mode, we are getting limited scope on many occasions, many times. So we have to depend on the artificial skills and at the same time artificial intelligence also. So how we will bring, or how we will lay the connectivity between these two, it will be the art of pedagogy in the true sense of the term. Then one of the very important aspects that I intend to deal with the issues of the intellectual property rights in terms of designing the courses, or in designing the reading materials, or designing the what we call the pedagogy model by the teachers. Because friends, probably you will be knowing that the intellectual property right, it is a very integral component, its protection even in every domain, because when a person creates something of intellectual value, because in case of the teaching and learning, the copyright is very, very important. So a copyright is very, very important, because there are so many segments in the domain of the copyright, right from the literary, musical, then artistic, or we can say the computer, then the cinematography, musical, etc., etc. So now, why it is relevant? Why it is relevant in the context of the pedagogy? Because you see, when I prepare a presentation, necessarily I can I can put some audio visuals from product produced by other people. Now, audio visual, the copyright of the audio visual, copyright of the audio visuals of enjoyed by other person, if we put it, incorporate it in our, what we'll call, in our productions or in our work, then there will be the direct infringement of the copyright. So as I am referring to the copyright, probably it is important in the sense that until and unless we are aware of the ABC of the copyright, what copyright means, and why copyright or the intellectual property right is to be protected. Because you might be knowing that Indian Copyright Act 1957 and the copyright various copyright conventions, right from the Berne Conventions to Universal Copyright Conventions, both at the international level and the national level, because the copyright law, basically it deals with the statutory rights, as at the same time it also has a reference to the international conventions. Now the question is that a teacher, whether a teacher should get certain exemptions or relaxations in production of the audiovisual materials, the what we'll call the study materials, which can be protected from the infringement of the copyright. Now, a writer, I am very quickly try to sum up the relevant components which are relevant for a teacher or a researcher in this sense, because we know what is plagiarism, because when we now everything is to be certified by the usually the software is developed to test the plagiarism, the level of the plagiarism in a work, research work, or any type of intellectual work. Now the right, what is the intellectual, means that it is the incorporeal right, or what we'll call it, that by investing our own intellectual capability, capital and labor, what will produce, it is our intellectual property. What will produce in our intellectual property, and its dimensions are very much, because normally when we talk about the copyright, we refer to the copyright of a book, copyright of a work, but the copyright can take place on so many things, right from the, that's why I'm not going to elaborate all the things, so just I am referring to it in terms of the importance for in teaching and learning. So there is a section, that section is called the section 52 of the Indian Copyright Act 1957. This section is very, very important for all those who are involved in teaching and research. This section 52 of the Indian Copyright Act 1957, because this Copyright Act has given certain exemptions, because based on this copyright, and there was a very leading judgment delivered by the Supreme Court of India in the Anand versus Deluxe film in 1978, based on that judgment, we got the opportunity to redesign certain exemptions specially meant for the teaching and research. Now, for example, if I publish an article on a newspaper on a current issue, political, economic and educational issue, whether that article can be reproduced in teaching or learning. Because I have, suppose somebody has written an article in a newspaper, and can a teacher refer to that article in the mode of teaching, in the delivery of the teaching or not, during the course of our teaching or not? There are two things. If that component deals with, subject deals with the current affairs, then probably a teacher can refer to that article. But if that article is not related to a current, affair, then probably direct reference to that article during the course of teaching and research without citation can land the teacher in a difficult situation. Similarly, we have to keep in mind one thing, that on the live events, the concept of the copyright does not refer. In the sense, that's the live sporting events, when it is telecast, the question of the copyright does not exist. But if it is to be recast, rebroadcast, then the question of the copyright comes. So direct, but here most important thing is that on a series of judgment, Delhi High Court and the Bombay High Court, as well as the Supreme Court on many occasions has clarified one thing. Because you find it interesting, because there are two parts. Once in audio visual, when we'll find an audio visual broadcasting, there is a part, one is called the information part, other is the audio visual part. But the information part, there is no copyright. So I repeat, in the information part there is no copyright. But in the audio visual component, suppose when a telecast is made, it creates some information, and at the same time it is telecast through a audio visual voice recording is there. We find some audio visual graphics, we'll find there, photographs we'll find there. Those things will come under the zone of the copyright. But information created, it remains in the public domain. It remains in the public domain, and that information can be used for the purpose of the teaching and research. Now, whether a teacher can refer to a judgment delivered by the High Courts and the Supreme Court during the course of discussion. Suppose Ram Janambhumi Babri Masjid case, the judgment delivered in the Ram Janambhumi Babri Masjid case. Then a very famous judgment, the Visakha judgment delivered by the Supreme Court, because we know why Visakha judgment is very, very important in Indian legal history. Because when we refer to this kind of judgments, we can, for the purpose of the teaching and research, until and unless that reference, that publication, or is protected or it is prohibited, we can use with proper citation. We can use it with proper citation. Now a question may come that titles of the book, because if a title of the book, whether the copyright exists in the title of a book or not, title of a book, whether copyright can be claimed in the title of a book or not, it is a very debatable point. It is a very debatable point, because there are two schools of thought. Because a title, because there is one where directly infringement, plea of infringement, it cannot successful. So there is another way, this is called the passing off. So I am just giving the ABC of the concept, because until and unless some basic idea about the violation of the copyright, because we teacher, we have to face on production of the online sources, we have to face the challenges of the copyright violations because of our ignorance. So, and that's why I am referring to this kind of references, so that we can be cautious. Now the question is, there was a Delhi University professor very recently in 2016. He landed in a very great difficulty. A professor from, I am not referring to the name, because the situation was like that. Because what was done, because that professor or that teacher, he made a contract with a photocopier agencies to distribute some photocopy notes among the students at the classrooms. So the matter went to it, because the publisher of the book, he filed a petition against that particular professor. So it was a case of 2016. So ultimately, the copier, they charge 50 paisa per copy to the students. But ultimately what happened? The copyright of the book, it remained with a separate publisher who published it, because a person, a author, he or she licenses his copyright to the publisher to publish it. So when the publisher will publish it, nobody can. He can use it for his personal use or for the purpose of teaching and research. Not he or she can lend it somebody third person, so that he or she can make photocopy of it, then he can market it or commercialize it. So the commercialization is not allowed at any cost under the Copyright Act. A teacher can use a copyrighted material exclusively. So again, because interruption is a part of this kind of exercise, so we have to bear with us with all these things. So there is no other alternative of that. So coming to the again copyright, so I have to conclude. I will not like to prolong it further and further, because copyright issues are so critical, because that ultimately, because we cannot, that's why we cannot allow or engage somebody to photocopy the books and to distribute all this among the students. Otherwise, the publisher can put up a big problem, because copyright violation is so it's a criminal offense, because a person can be in prison up to 2-3 years, because a copyright violation is a very, very serious issue. So that's why I consider that our learned faculties, they should actually, I want to just bring attention to this vital aspect, so that they can awaken to the issue, or they can accordingly customize their what we call their presentation, their work in that way. So this is the exemption, because the law has given sufficient exemption to the teacher, because even the unpublished work, because there is an often ambiguity whether copyright exists in an unpublished work or not. Copyright exists in an unpublished work also. I made it clear. I would like to clarify it, that the copyright exists in unpublished work also, because copyright protection is given under section 16 and the 17 of the Copyright Act, because this is the statutory dimension. This is the statutory dimension, because even a foreign writer, if or he publishes in India, will get the protection of Indian copyright. A foreign writer, he or she publishes a book in India, will get the protection of the copyright. Then another important thing I have to highlight, because in case of the joint authorship, if a work is published, the copyright continues after during the life of the author, or after 60 years of his or her date. After 60 years of his or her date. Again, in case of a joint work, if the second author, he dies, because the copyright first author dies and the second author survives, then the period of 60 years will be counted after the date of the second author. So these are some of the critical points that is important for us, because without knowing all these things, we may face some kind of problem in our day-to-day life, in our professional life. Then again, the copyright exists in the photographs also, because we take the photographs, because the copyright owner of the photographs is the person who takes the photographs. But at the same time, if that person is engaged by somebody else and paid for that, the copyright will exist with the person who has heard his or her services. So naturally, in case of the newspaper publication, because in newspaper publications, because the copyright exists with the publishing house, the newspaper agency, the producer, not with the person who creates the work. So these are some of the concepts in the domain of copyright, and I think that these issues are very, very relevant, because until and unless we know these things, because we may be in problem, because often I find questions from many teachers that on the issues of the copyright, especially on the intellectual property. So that's why I decided that I should add this component in this in the course of my deliberation. And I think that the copyright, what we should keep in mind, that is that until and unless we defend that we use the copyrighted material or for the benefit for the benefit of the research as well as teaching, then only we can protect that our case or our defense. But again, many teachers, they are engaged in examination works. Now, suppose Dibrugarh University or the Guwahati University or Delhi University, they gives the assignments to the teachers to set the question papers. Now, who is supposed to be the copyright holder of the question papers? Friends, it is the teachers who prepares the questions. The copyright should rest on the teacher. Now, if a university teacher, he writes something or he creates certain work, university is not supposed to be the copyright holder. The teacher, particular teacher, will get the copyright because that university pays her to teach, not to write. University pays her to him or her to teach, not to write books. So this is the basic postulate or the spirit of the copyright. There are so many dimensions. It is so vast. I just want to encapsulate all the things, and this is, dear learned friends, this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is just the tip of the iceberg. So this is the dimensional value of the copyrights and its protection we demand, and our goal is that in teaching and research we always focus on quality. So in terms of transformation of an average learner to a good learner, the success of a teacher depends. Then a good learner to an excellent learner to a smart learner, it will the success of a teacher can be scripted. If a slow learner can be converted to a good learner to a different to an excellent learner. So this is a continuous process. So in these terms, probably I remember Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, our former president of India, a very illustrious son of this land, that he said that equality is not achieved accidentally. It always results from good intention, sincere efforts, intelligent direction, and meticulous execution. Excellence in thinking and action is the foundation for any vision. Excellence is not by accident. It is a process where an individual or organization or a nation continuously tries to be better oneself. So this is the submission of APJ Abdul Kalam on attaining quality. Now, after these long discussions, probably a curiosity might have arisen in the respected participant, in mind of the respected participants. You have very patiently listening to me, and you have rather tolerated me for the long time, in spite of being so many interruptions. Of course, it is the unintentional interruptions, because I must admit recognize the level of your patience and the level of your what we call, this is required. This is required because I must recognize the level of your patience, because toleration, because you have tolerated me for such a long time. Now, because of this, one thing has come to my mind, that what I personally think about a teacher, because a teacher is just like a potter who is expert in the craft of making the hard-earned from the what we'll call the items from the art, or items from the art like the lamp and all other things. So it is like a potter. So he beats because the potter, while preparing a pot, an earthen pot, he beats it externally to shape it. But at the same time, he or she presses it from the inside. Okay? Externally, he or she continues to beat, but at the same time, he or she continues to support it from the inside. And I think a teaching is like that kind of business, because we have to shape externally the outcome of the teaching, but internally we have to strengthen our values. Finally, when I will leave this space, then probably if I could have touched your minds by virtue of the value of my deliberation, that will be everlasting. That will be everlasting. If my value is richer, I can be assured that you will treasure the outcome of my deliberation. If I have spoken rubbish all through the day, then you will simply brush me aside and will say that that person, enough is enough, that person has bored us for the whole session. And I have to, that will be the sheer dismissal on my part. Then I will understand my limitations from the feedback. Then I have to continue to reshape. I have to continue to reshape, just like a potter, my external outcome, and at the same time I have to increase my internal value by taking the guidance from experience or persons who are expert in this kind of delivery. That is the coordination of the externality and the internality, and it is the art and the skill of a teacher. The person who can master in the art, he or she can be the acceptable teacher. And with these words, I think I may again must recognize that you have attended this session with a very high expectation, and probably I was demoralized at the first stroke, even when my PPT started not to function. Because in spite of that, I tried on my part to, based on my memory, because to enrich you, and I don't know how far I could have fulfilled the level of your aspirations. I do not know, but again, even you let me know my limitations. Then in the coming days, I will try, and I will to overcome all those limitations. And I think every one of us, it is incumbent on us, on our part, that we should make a level of, we should infuse or we should increase the level of self-confidence among the students. We have to make them critical. We have to make them hardworking. Then only we'll find the beauty of the teaching and learning. Now we have a tendency, because we know, because I learned my operation of my smartphone from my daughter, because I learned this smartphone operation from my daughter, because we have to learn so many things today, because situational dynamics is like that, because the learners, because the kids are also, they also can help us in this style of learning. The learning space is, because it is not confined in the open, the online mode of education or online mode of pedagogy. But thing is that we are to be confined to the limitations. Like we have to depend on so many external things like the internal connectivity and all other things. Now, that's why I think the story or my what I'll depend on, because when the PPT started not to function, solely I try to depend, or I pray to God to create power here and to help me to transmit through this point. So finally, I tried to establish the symphony between power and the poetry. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Hope all our participants have enjoyed it. So now it's the session for question and answer. So our esteemed participants, if you have any query regarding the presentation that sir have already made, you can just put your question in the chat box and I will convey it to sir, or sir can also directly go through your chat box. And if any participant wants directly to communicate with sir, please raise your hand or send me a message so that I can unmute you and you can ask a question. There is no hurdle for any language. Sir can easily deal with English, Hindi, or even in Assamese language. Those things. Sir, actually, I got a question from Dr. Karabi Kumar.
Yes.
She said that what should be the artificial skills that a situational leader follow?
Yes, very good question. Artificial skill that a situational
leader follow.
Okay, first of all, the situational leadership in case of a teacher, because classroom management for a teacher while dealing with the heterogeneous components is a great challenge. First of that, a teacher's to be a leader, because a leader to be very professionally deal with a situation, he is to know the antecedent. Because to be a great situational leader, probably a teacher first of all should collect information, the background about the teachers, about the students, and to the extent possible know about the limitations. Because strength people easily, because there are so many students in the class who are otherwise very, very brilliant, very, very talented, and because of some situational compulsions, they are introverts. So, in that sense, a teacher is there. I think that because it is even applicable our day-to-day life. Because if we do not know the history, or even it is very much, it becomes very difficult on our past to find a solution. Because when we go to a doctor, while the doctor will ask you first, if you go to a doctor and you will complain that you are having some problem with your health, then he will ask, or she will ask for from what days you are having pain, the level of your pain, then where you are feeling pain. So this is the history. This is the antecedent. I think a situational leader will prepare his or her roadmap to deal a situation in a classroom based on the antecedent. So this can be one of the aspects. There is the another aspect. That is the uncertainty management. The example that I referred to, because the story of the loss of a horse, then the loss of the savior. How the teacher, how that situation was tried to be overcome by matching of the mind or by the process of reconciliation. Nowadays, you'll find that even people do not file to take the help of the ADR system, that is the alternative dispute resolution mechanism. It is accepted. People prefer to go to an arbitrator or to an conciliator rather than to approach the rather than to knock the door of the doors of the court, because this is our mind. Because a teacher, his mind, that's why I thought, because in my slide there was a concept of the normative dimension or the semantic dimension of the pedagogy. I think that the situational leadership, it will require that the knowledge about this antecedent of the person. Now, my limitations here. Today, I have failed to get the antecedent of the from where, because I have been informed about the antecedent of the or the information I have been supplied, that who are the persons in the group of these participants. Because I got afraid, so many senior persons are here, so many brilliant persons are here. So how can I will try to address their concerns? Because some of you are all scholars, you have all the higher level of intelligence. So it is very, not only difficult, it is very selective. So I think, Madam, have if any supplementary, then she can. Okay.
So there is another question from Dr. Pranita. Sir, if I set a question paper for an university, how I claim for copyright? How can I claim for copyright? That's the question actually.
So you see, when you set a question paper for the university, because you have been paid for the job, and your copyright is assumed to be protected, because it is in indirect form. It is in indirect form because you have prepared it and submitted to the university. University is to protect the copyright of you. The university is to protect the copyright of the teacher. It is in indirect form. It is in indirect form. So you have been paid. So you have, for that you have prepared the question papers. You cannot publish it, and the copyright, your copyright, will be protected by the university. So it is an indirect form, because university remains under compulsion not to divulge your identity in official. Okay.
So Dr. Das sir has put a question. My question is, what is your philosophy about a teacher to be considered a good teacher or a bad teacher? Most of the time we have seen that there is a difference between the presence of the students in the particular classes of two different kinds of teachers, that is a good teacher and a bad one. Kindly try to analyze it.
So first of all, I must thank Dr. Ajay Kumar Das, a very learned principal and very senior person, for giving this much of interest. One thing is that it is very difficult, because to conceptualize the concept of the good teacher and bad teacher. Now, instead of bad teacher and good teachers, now in the context that this session has been designed, probably all of us will recognize that we are concerned much more about the smart teacher. Who is supposed to be a smart teacher? So to be a smart teacher, the learner has to be also smart, because we use the smartphone, and until and unless we are not smarter to the level of the phone. So first of all, we assume that there will be a smart, our dimension is that, or our goal is that a teacher should be a smart teacher. The second phase is a good teacher and a best teacher. From the level of acceptance, from the level of acceptance by the students. But there are certain parameters that we should consider formally to judge the qualities of a teacher. That is the feedback form. Feedback is a very important component. So naturally, we have to judge the level of teaching or the extent of the acceptance of a teacher by the students, by the learners, for continuously, at least for 3-5 years. We have to assess them. we have to assess them. Then also we have to give them the opportunity to transform their or his or her weakness into strength. Then finally we have to, because that's why the courses like the orientation courses, these kind of sessions, this faculty development program and series of this kind of activities or exercises are being made by the different organizations from time to time. Otherwise, now my concept is one concept I missed here to be dealt with. What is that? It is depends on the perception of the learner also. If a learner consider a teacher a sage on a stage or a facilitator, this is very, very important, because nowadays pedagogy is rather focused on facilitating the students to learn, rather than a teacher in the form of a lecturer who will stand on a podium and continues to deliver the lectures just like a sadhu delivers his sermon to the disciples. So that concept has changed. Now it depends on so many things. That's why I have at a very initial stage I delivered that the teaching very much akin to the art of motherhood. It is something, that skill that we should learn from the mothers, because a mother can deal with successfully 4 children, 3 children simultaneously. But this is the beauty of the motherhood. And a mother in that sense is a born teacher, because the inherent traits that is available in the motherhood, if it can be professionalized, it can be professionalized, it can be externalized through proper brainstorming, I think the value, the abstract mood of pedagogy will be developed and it will be everlasting. Thank you.
Sir, the last question probably, it's again from Bipul Soikia. He is actually clarifying his previous question. His question is, sir, who can claim copyright in originality in case of sudden rise of Ranu Mandal in Bollywood? Himesh Reshammiya, Atindra Chakrabarti, or Ranu Mandal herself, as we are once familiar with that very tune, Teri Meri Kahani.
You see, I will, because at the very initial, at the start of my session, I admitted that whether, or I constructed that whether a teacher should conclude, or a teacher should live in the passive form. Because in American pedagogy, a finality, the learner is shown the way to solve the question, solve the problem, not the direct key, answer key to the problem. If we directly provide the answer key to the problem, probably we will be in the danger of what we'll call will be in the danger of killing or eliminating the out-of-box thinking, the thinking faculty or the cognitive faculty of the learner. Now, with regard to your question, I would like to respond in the way that you see that in copyright there is 2 forms. One is the substantive, the original right, and other is the derivative right. So the copyright, the original, the first word, it starts with section 13 of the Indian Copyright Act, that the original, literary, musical, I repeat, original, literary, musical, artistic work or the dramatic work, the copyright exists. So the copyright includes again the cinematograph as well as the recordings. So from that spirit, we can understand that the copyright exists on the originality. On the original, it is to be original. But to be original, it is not necessary that the idea, because copyright does not express or does not exist in ideas. Copyright exists on the mode of expression. That's why for the historical fiction there is no copyright. A film can be, if the Gandhi, a film on Gandhi can be made by so many producers, but because the topic may be same, but even in each and every film, you will find that Gandhi's character will be interpreted in a different way. Like if 10 painters is engaged to paint the photograph of, to make a painting of the Dr. RKB Law College, I am sure that the represent of the 10 painters will be different, but the content is same. The copyright exists in the mood of expression, not in the subject. That's why the question of novelty or the originality is not that much relevant in case of, as it is to be relevant in case of patent, design, or in terms of the trademark. But there is a but. Again, I have to, there is if and but, and that what that but is that the originality test in case of cinematograph film, or in case of book, or in case of what we call the musical recording is not same. It is not same. Its levels are different. There are so many ways. That's why you'll find that the soundtrack, the copyright exists in the soundtrack in the cinematograph, and it is the part of the cinematography soundtrack. But at the same time, in case of the musical work, you'll find that the originality can be twisted. Originality can be twisted in the sense that the soundtrack, if it is not touched or if it is not infected, then rearrangement of the musical work, it is allowed. That's why the copyright, that's why it is called the copyright in the musical work does not exist in the rendition, in the presentation, in the style of singing. That is called a rendition of the song. The copyright does not exist there. It is the reduction of the particular, it is the lyrics where the copyright is material. So I think based on these propositions, probably you will find the answer, because I have shown you a dimension to get the answer to your problem. Thank you.
মই প্ৰশ্ন এটা অসমীয়াতে ক'ব বিচাৰিছো আপোনাক।
খুব ভাল, অসমীয়া ক'বলৈ মন গৈ আছে বহুত।
হয় হয় স্যাৰ, আমাৰ যেহেতু গ্ৰামাঞ্চলৰ কলেজ, সেইকাৰণে আমাৰ মোৰ টিংখং কলেজ, আমাৰ কলেজখনৰ নাম টিংখং, ডিব্ৰুগড় টিংখঙৰ হয়। হয় স্যাৰ, মই পাইছো আপোনাক লগ পাইছো স্যাৰ, সেইকাৰণে মই চিনি পাইছো স্যাৰ। আমাৰ যেহেতু ছাত্ৰ ছাত্ৰীসকলৰ এণ্ড্ৰইড মোবাইল বহুতৰে নাই, এতিয়া আমাৰ মেজৰ ক্লাছৰ 30 ভিতৰত ধৰি লৈছো, খুব বেছি 10 আৰু 15টা মান তেনেকুৱাহে মোবাইল ফোন আছে, এণ্ড্ৰইড মোবাইল ফোন। সেয়েহে ছাত্ৰ ছাত্ৰীসকলে এতিয়া যিহেতু ডিজিটেল ক্লাছ হৈছে বাৰু, আমি ফেকাল্টি ডেভেলপমেণ্ট প্ৰগ্ৰেমত আমি বহুত উপকৃত হৈছো। এইটো প্ৰগ্ৰেমত মই বিশেষকৈ মই যিহেতু কম্পিউটাৰ একেবাৰে নাজানো, কিন্তু কম্পিউটাৰ চলাবলৈ শিকিলো, গতিকে এইখিনিৰ পৰা মই যথেষ্ট উপকৃত ময়ো হৈছো, তেওঁলোককো কৰাব বিচাৰিছো। কিন্তু তাহাঁতৰ যিহেতু এণ্ড্ৰইড মোবাইলে নাই, ইয়াৰ পিছত যিটো ডিজিটেল ক্লাছ বা তেনেকুৱা ধৰণৰ হ'ব, তেতিয়া আমি কেনেধৰণে সহায় কৰিব পাৰিম ছাত্ৰ ছাত্ৰীসকলক? যদি ক্লাছৰুমত আগৰ দৰে যদি শ্ৰেণীকোঠাত যদি আমি পঢ়াবলৈ নাপাওঁ, তেতিয়াহ'লে সেই একেবাৰে অভাৱনীয় সেই ছাত্ৰ ছাত্ৰীসকলক আমি কেনেধৰণে পাঠদান কৰিব পাৰিম, সেই বিষয়ত আপুনি অকণমান ক'ব নেকি বাৰু?
এণ্ড্ৰইড মোবাইলৰ, অকল এণ্ড্ৰইড মোবাইল থাকিলেই বাইদেউ বা মেডাম আপোনাৰ সমস্যাটো সমাধান নহ'ব। যদি ষ্টুডেণ্টজনে এই এণ্ড্ৰইড মোবাইলত, আপুনি জানে যে এই পেকবিলাক যথেষ্ট কষ্টলি, যেতিয়া আমি ইণ্টাৰনেট পাৰচেজ কৰিব লাগে, আৰু সেইটো কাৰণে মই কৈছো যে
হয়।
অনলাইন মোড অফ এডুকেশনৰ যে সাকসেস ষ্টৰী মানে আমাৰ নেট পেক কিনিবৰ কাৰণে ষ্টুডেন্ট সকলৰ সামৰ্থ্য বহুতৰ নাই
সেইটো
বহুতৰ নাই মই
হয়
আৰু 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 এন্ড্ৰইড মোবাইলৰ আমাৰ এটা সাৰ্ভেত ডিব্ৰুগড় ইউনিভাৰ্সিটিত আমি এটা পাইছিলো যে প্ৰায় 60 to 62% ষ্টুডেন্টৰ মাজতহে এই এন্ড্ৰইড মোবাইল আছে বা এই অনলাইন হেৰিটো আৰু ভাৰতবৰ্ষৰ ষ্টেটিষ্টিক্স এটোটা গোটেই ভাৰতবৰ্ষ সেইকাৰণেতো ইউজিচিয়ে ক'লে যে অনলাইন ইভালুৱেশ্যন ইজ নট পসিবল ইন ইণ্ডিয়ান সিস্টেম গতিকে এতিয়া আমাৰ
System.
কথাটো হ'ল আমাৰ যিটো এইটো প্ৰবলেম কিন্তু এই যেহেতু আমাৰ এই প্ৰবলেম বিলাক তাৰ মাজত আমি কিছুমান তাৰ মাজত আমি সলিউশন উলিয়াব লাগিব প্ৰথম সলিউশনটো হ'ব পাৰে মই ভাবো যে আমি এতিয়া
হয়।
কিছুমান শিক্ষকসকলে আমি কিছুমান ভিডিওগ্ৰাফি বনাব লাগিব সেই ভিডিওগ্ৰাফি বিলাক আমি ক্লাছৰুমৰ
হয়, sir.
ওপৰত আমাৰ যিবিলাক কিছুমান বিশেষকৈ কনসেপ্টৰ ওপৰত যিবিলাক বিশেষকৈ ক্ৰিটিকেল কনসেপ্ট আছে কনসেপ্ট বিলাকৰ ওপৰত আমি কিছুমান অডিও ভিজুৱেল আমি বনাব লাগিব সেইবোৰ আমাৰ কপিৰাইট থাকিব সেইবিলাকৰ ওপৰত আমি যিটো আমি বনাম আৰু
হয়।
সেইবিলাক মই ভাবিছো
হয়।
সেইবিলাক আমি এখন চিডিত ট্ৰান্সফৰ্ম কৰিলে 10 টকা পৰে এখন যেতিয়া আমি চিডিত
হয়।
আমি কৰো আমি সেই ষ্টুডেন্ট বিলাকৰ মাজত এই তেনেকুৱা ধৰণৰ লেকচাৰ বিলাক বিলাই দিব লাগিব আৰু সেইবিলাক যেনেকৈ আমি কিতাপ বিলাক বা গাঁৱৰ সেই চিডি অন্তত কম্পিউটাৰত থাকিলে এই নতুনলে চিডি
হয়।
কৰি তেওঁলোকক দিব পৰা যাব কাৰণ একটা জেগাত তেওঁলোকৰ এতিয়া বহুতে মেট্ৰিকত পোৱা ল'ৰা ছোৱালী থকা ঘৰ লেপটপ আছে লেপটপ
আছে।
পাইছে বহুতে কম্পিউটাৰ আছে বহুতৰ গতিকে সেইখিনি মই ভাবো সেইটো এটা তেওঁলোকৰ কাৰণে সহায় হ'ব পাৰে আৰু সেইটো আমি এতিয়া পৰীক্ষামূলকভাৱে আমি কৰিবৰ কাৰণে আমি আগবাঢ়িছো আমাৰ বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ত তেনেকুৱা এটা পৰিকল্পনা লৈছে আৰু মই বহু শিক্ষানুষ্ঠানত দেখিছো যে সেই কামটো তেওঁলোকে কৰিছে কাৰণ এন্ড্ৰইড মোবাইল যেহেতু নাই আমি দিব
নাই।
নোৱাৰিম আমিতো
হয়।
ছাত্ৰ ছাত্ৰীক দিব নোৱাৰো আৰু এই বিষয়ে যদি আন ধৰণেৰে যদি কিবা ইন্টাৰনেট নথকাকে যদি অনলাইন ঘৰত বহি পেলাই শিক্ষা লোৱাৰ ব্যৱস্থাৰ ওপৰত মই ভাবিছো যে এইটো যদি তেওঁলোকে সেই ভিডিঅ' প্ৰডাকশ্যন বিলাক অডিঅ' ভিডিঅ' প্ৰডাকশ্যন বিলাক তেওঁলোকৰ কাৰণে সহায় হ'ব পাৰে আৰু তেওঁলোকে যদি কিবা বুজি নাপায় সেইবিলাক পৰৱৰ্তী সময়ত সেই প্ৰডাকশ্যন আপোনালোকৰ লগত তেওঁলোকে যোগাযোগ কৰিব পাৰে কাৰণ তাৰ মাজত আমি এটা সলিউশন উলিয়াব লাগিব অন্যথাটো মই ডাইৰেক্ট আপোনালোকক ইয়াৰ ৰিমেডি দিব অসুবিধা হ'ব কিন্তু এইটো আমি ফেজ ৱাইজ যে এইটো
হয়।
প্ৰবলেমৰ পিছত এইটো প্ৰবলেম কেনেকৈ আমি আগবাঢ়ি যাম কিন্তু এটা কথা ঠিক যে অনলাইন মোড অফ এডুকেশ্যনৰ সাকসেস ষ্টৰীটো এটা ইটসেলফ ইজ এ টপিক অফ গ্ৰেট ৰিচাৰ্চ আৰু সেইটো এটা কনষ্ট্ৰাকশ্যন অফ প্ৰবলেম এইটোৰ পৰা ভৱিষ্যতৰ আমি ফাইণ্ডিং আমি অনাৰ ক্ষেত্ৰত আমাক সহায় কৰিব থেংক ইউ
হয় স্যার ধন্যবাদ স্যার
Okay. So we have already crossed our time. It's already now 1:38. So it is 1:40. Actually, we have crossed 40 minutes. So first of all, I'd like to thank you, sir, for enlightening us with your wonderful thoughts, thought-provoking speech, in spite of the serious network issues and technical difficulties. So you have touched almost all the aspects of situational leadership, giving more emphasis on intellectual property and specifically to copyright, which is one of the most important aspects in today's technological world for all the academicians, because we need to distribute various research-oriented things, articles, and research things to our students. So hope our participants have all listened and learned a lot from you, sir. So with this, I end up this session. Thank you, one and all.